Easy now, hunter. You have climbed so far that the city below looks like a memory. Chimneys like gravestones, roofs like the backs of old beasts gone still. Here, at the edge of the nightmare of Mensis, the air feels thin and bright and very tired. The moon is huge this evening, like an old coin held too long and worn to a smooth face. You needn't stay awake for all of this. You have earned your rest. Let me keep the watch if your eyes close. The story will continue without complaint, quiet as snowfall, and you will miss nothing you truly need. Listen to the wind hum through the iron cages that hang from the towers like strange seed pods. Their thin bars chime when the night breathes, and the sound travels along the parapets, where the lamps burn low. Far away, bellwomen mutter in rhythms that never quite settle. No one shouts here. Even the steps of the few figures that wander are careful and clipped, as if they fear waking something that does not sleep. Find a place to sit. This little kink in the stone rail will do. From here, the view draws your thoughts into one slow line, along the bridge, through the arch, up toward a pale spire ribboned with cages and banners the color of ash. Beneath it lies a basin of mist, a cradle scooped from the nightmare itself. The ground is stitched with walkways and gables and rooms that never truly close. Somewhere deep in that basin, a lullaby travels, faint as a hand rocking an empty crib. We will go there in time. Not yet. Close your eyes if you like. The lamps are steady. The wind keeps the bells talking. I will keep the timeline simple. No sudden turns. We will begin far enough back to understand how we arrived at this quiet height. And then we will move inward, circle by circle, toward the little sound at the heart of the nightmare. If, along the way, sleep takes you, that is more than allowed. It is welcome. A good hunter knows when to set the weapon down. This tale has a single thread running through it, and we will tie ourselves to that thread so we do not drift. A school of seekers who wanted more sight than their eyes could hold. A host who learned to smile inside a maze. A brain lowered like a beacon, whose very presence frays the nerves. And an infant who never shows their face, yet fills the air with a last cry that rules the night. Based on what we know of their devices, the school of Mensis believed the mind could be widened like a door. They wore cages said to restrain the will and to help them listen for distant answers, and they begged the cold heavens for eyes. They were answered, though not as they expected. You know the kind. Every age has them. People who are certain that if they can just look more closely, they will break through the wall that keeps sorrow in and wisdom out. They do not think themselves cruel. They call themselves brave. And perhaps they are. But the world does not always reward brave questions with kind replies. When they forced the door to open, they found themselves on this side of it instead, where the moon seems closer than breath and thoughts fray like old cloth. Let your breathing match the wind. It comes across the tower in long, even bands, then falls away. Across from us, a bridge ends against a tower face where iron cages sway. Some hold nothing at all. Some swing with a residue of presence, the way a chair will feel warm after rises from it. Those cages could imply what this place values. The mind quieted, the will pared down, the sky turned into an ear. If you listen, the stone itself seems to lean toward what hangs above it. We will walk through a few places tonight, but always gently. There is yahar'gul out there in the dark, a village that learned the word unseen too well. There is the square where a mass of gathered bodies remembered how to stand. There is this spire with its brasswork and its storm of eyes. There is a pit we will look down into without leaning too far. And there is a small room at the top of a long climb where a song is playing for a child who does not answer. None of these will startle us. We will arrive at each in order, and we will leave them as softly as we came. For now, let me set the picture even deeper, so your thoughts have walls to rest against. The stones under us keep a memory of heat, baked all day by a moon that looks too near, and cooled to a comfortable warmth by the night wind. The metal of the cage beside us is cold in the fingers, but not hostile. On the parapet's lip, the chalk line of old footsteps, white as bone dust, runs to a door and stops. Somewhere lower, you hear a sound like wet ropes being lifted, slow and patient, then set down somewhere higher. You hear laughter that is not cruel, only pleased with itself, the way scholars sometimes laugh when they have solved an equation they wrote themselves. If you wish, you may loosen your grip now, on the day, on the hour that brought you here, on the last thought before this one. The night will bear your weight. Let your shoulders drop. That's better. The Nightmare of Mensis is a record of choices and consequences laid out like a puzzle on a table. We will read it together, and we will prefer the kindest reading that the facts will allow. Before we move on, know this: I will not tangle you in a knot of names. When a name is needed, it will arrive with company, where it is, what it means, why it matters, and then it will sit quietly while we talk around it. When the world once was calm, before this nightmare grew, there were halls of study and gardens where minds argued under old trees. The questions that gathered there were simple to name and dangerous to ask. What are the beings above us? If they are gods, why do they speak in riddles? If they are not, why do our prayers find them? If a child of such a being is lost, will the empty place it leaves behind echo forever? The answers, such as they were, led here. Do not worry if a sentence drifts past you. Let it go. What matters will repeat in gentler words later. Think of this as the slow turning of a mobile over a sleeping child, each piece glinting for a moment and then circling away. In a moment, we will leave this parapet. We will pass one lamp, then another, and then descend a little. And in that descent, we will feel the history of the place press closer to the skin, as if the nightmare breathes more warmly nearer its heart. But for just a few more breaths, listen with me to the long, even note of the wind through the cages. It is almost kind. All right. Rise when you're ready, or stay seated and follow in thought. Either is fine. We have our thread, a school that begged for eyes a host who arranged a dream, a brain whose gaze can bruise the mind, and a child who never speaks yet rules the soundscape. With that thread, we cannot be lost. We will take the first steps into the older world now, the world before this nightmare learned to sing. And when we return, the lamps will be where we left them, and your rest will be waiting. Let us step back, hunter, to a quieter world before the bells. Imagine a college by still water, old stones smoothed by years of debate, where scholars walked among hedges that knew their footsteps. They called it Bernworth. Here, Master Willem presided, an aged tutor whose lessons leaned toward patience and listening. He spoke of eyes on the inside, of thought raised carefully rather than by force. Even now, if you listen, you can hear the gentleness of that beginning. People who meant no harm, standing on a terrace, asking if the sky might be larger than it looked. Not everyone agreed on how to reach that larger sky. Some believed contemplation would suffice. Others looked downward to the labyrinth beneath Yahar'gul, where earlier peoples, Thumerians, left chalices, altars, and doors that still answer to ritual scholars brought proofs from those depths into the light. Carved vessels, unsettling blood, fragments of worship. The idea took root that contact with the beings above had once been managed here on Earth, with forms and consequences, and that it might be managed again. When illness gripped the city, relief arrived in a form people could hold. From Bernworth Circle came Lawrence, earnest and impatient, who helped found what became the Healing Church. The church's answer was blood ministration, medicine the city embraced. Lamps burned later, doors opened to strangers. Based on what we know from sermons and workshop records, the institution grew quickly around its gift, and the nights lengthened because people learned to hope caution remained. Willem's refrain, "Fear the old blood," lingered like a cool hand on a fevered brow. But institutions grow in the shape of their strongest promise, and relief is persuasive. The church raised its great cathedral at the city's heart. Within its upper reaches formed a select body called the choir. Their work was quiet, study, translation, and attempts at communion with the higher powers through insight rather than haste. In an orphanage behind locked wards, they trained minds to look beyond, not with shackles, but with symbols and runes meant to refine attention. They believed the great ones might answer a gentle call elsewhere, a different temperament gathered under the church's umbrella. The school of Menses favored instruments and rite. Their scholars wore iron cages, devices said to restrain the will, to make the mind an aerial. Where the choir waited for answers, Menses sought to tune a signal and send it. To outsiders, it looked like hunger for risk. To the school, it felt like progress. Their methods would later be linked to yahar'gul, the unseen village, an association the city learned not to say too loudly. This was Yahar'gul before the nightmare hardened, a cathedral that healed, an orphanage that studied, and a sect that diagrammed the air. Between them flowed old stories from the chalices, a Thumerian age that crowned a queen below ground, rites of contact, marriages made between mortals and distant powers, the rumor in the streets above was simpler. The heavens were not empty. When the wind ran the avenues, the church's banners and the laundry of the poor snapped on the same note. Older still was the memory beneath the bricks. In those halls the Pthumerians once kept company with great ones. Whatever that meant, it left marks. Seals responded to blood, doors opened to certain words, and grief seemed to hold court. A veiled woman appears in tales from those depths, a queen whose sorrow travels upward like a scent. We will meet her again. For now, it is enough to know that the city built over vows it only half understood. From this mixture of reverence and impatience, the church's branches leaned apart. The choir kept keys in the upper ward, tending gardens of moonlight and glass. They listened, hoping that a kind answer could be invited by care. Menses worked where streets curve oddly, and sound carries too far. They diagrammed, constrained, and prepared. Both sides sought the same thing, a larger circuit for the mind, and both believed their approach might save the city. It is easier to share quick mercy than difficult wisdom. Blood ministration quieted pain, and in that relief, people wanted more. The workshops forged tools for those nights when treatment went poorly. This too felt like care. To an ordinary Yarnamite walking home with a warm vial in a pocket, it seemed a just balance, charity and vigilance in one cup. Few noticed when vigilance began to set the table. All the while, an older refrain worked its way through research and prayer, that the great ones lose their children and seek surrogates. You can hear this belief in item texts and in the way certain rooms are arranged. Whether you accept every implication or not, it shapes the city's choices. Why cradles are such careful places here. Why lullabies travel so far. Scholars turned the refrain into study. Priests turned it into hope. Neither wished to accept that absence might be permanent. So we find Yohanan poised between three sincere tendencies: contemplation, remedy, and reach. The college by the lake refined thought in silence. The cathedral poured relief into waiting hands. The school in shadow tuned the mind into a listening chamber. None of this felt monstrous at the time. It felt like people doing their best. You can walk that older Yohanan in thought, the lamps untroubled, the stones less weary. In a back room of the orphanage, a tutor sets aside a notebook and tells a child in a very soft voice that not all visitors come by door or window. In the cathedral, a line of the sick stands with composure that comes from believing the worst is over. And in the quarter where experiments thrive, quiet holds like a held breath. Here is the gentle truth. Much of what follows begins not in malice, but in ache. People wanted not to hurt, not to be left, not to feel too small for the world they were in. The scholars by the lake thought the mind could deepen without breaking. The ministers thought blood could be taught to obey. The school in shadow thought a perfectly tuned mind would earn a loving answer. When the world did answer, it was not love as they expected it. If you have drifted, that is all right. The point is calm and simple. Before the nightmare coalesced, Yahar'gul was a braid of thought, faith, and experiment. The old halls below supplied relics and warnings. The college supplied questions. The church supplied remedies, and a stage upon which two approaches, choir and mensis, could part ways. From this setting, the next circle widens naturally. A veil will lift. The moon will come near. A ritual will find its hour. But for now, let the older city set like a foundation beneath your thoughts. We will build carefully on it as we go. We have the older world set beneath us like calm stone, hunter. Now, let the next circle widen. The school of Mensis did not make its preparations here among the cages all at once. Their work began in streets the city chose not to name aloud, Yahar'gul, the unseen village. By daylight, its doors look shut in the ordinary way. By night, the corners seemed to stretch a little longer, and sound carried too far along the walls. People vanished between one street and the next. Based on what we know, those taken were carried by tall figures, with sacks to a hidden jail within yahar'gul, likely as part of the school's preparations. If you ever woke in a cell where the light washed everything pale, then you have breathed that place. The captors were not hunters of beasts in the usual sense. They gathered people and, this is careful inference, perhaps gathered them for a rite intended to draw an answer from the cold heavens. The rooms felt arranged less to punish bodies than to hold minds in a certain shape. A ritual needs a pattern. Yahar'gul provided one. Over all of this lay a veiling presence, thin as a bubble and strong as fate. In the lake beside Bergenwerth, a strange being, Rom, floated in a pocket of stillness. Rom's existence is widely understood to hide the truth of the sky, holding back the blood moon and masking certain workings in the city. While that veil held, the world pretended at ordinary moonlight, and Yahar'gul's rite continued as if under a cloth. One night, a hunter stepped onto that lake and faced the spider in its quiet water. Whether mercy or necessity guided the hand is not for us to decide here. What matters is the effect. When Rom's veil was pierced, the deception fell away. The blood moon rose, and what had been tucked out of sight stood plainly in the road. This could explain why the unseen village stopped pretending to be empty. The bells there became easy to hear. Under the red light, the square at the village's heart revealed what it had been prepared to do. Chime maidens on high balconies lifted their instruments and kept a strict rhythm. Below, matter gathered, remains that had rained down from above, and the will that had arranged them. And a towering shape took form. People call it the One Reborn. It is safest to say that it appears to be the culmination of the rite in that place, brought to pitch by the maiden's timing. You climb the stairs, hush the bells, and the square grows quieter by degrees, like a storm running out of coastline. If your thoughts have grown heavy, let them sink and rest. The gentle meaning is enough. The school of Mensis wanted proof that the boundary could be moved, that symbols and breath and bell could force a reply. The one reborn is less a person than a sign that something answered, if only as a reflex. The red light fixed the square like glass, and even those who did not understand felt the air stretch thin. Meanwhile, the veil's fall let other sights come near. In that lake, with the spider gone, a veiled queen appeared and looked toward the red sky. You will see her again higher up, pointing the way toward a room where a lullaby does work that words cannot. For now, think of her presence as proof that the city's present and the age beneath it were touching, leaving fingerprints on each other. We can pause by the gate and see without staring. The unseen village is not a maze because it is cruel. It is a maze because those who adapted it believed complexity could hold a greater attention. Lamps give off a thinner glow. Hallways lean with the logic of a diagram. The bells track your steps like an inward heartbeat. If you close your eyes, you can almost picture a scholar in an iron crown of bars, less to protect the mind than to pare it to a point. Even here, kindness breathes. Hunters call to hunters in the courts that open like mouths, and together they quiet the balcony bells. The square's roar becomes a murmur, one breath, then the next. When the square settles, the school's work does not end. It changes rooms. Behind the square, through the thing slumped like a mummified host in Advent Plaza, you touch what looks like a husk and find yourself elsewhere, in a place that smells of dust and old ink. The lecture building, they once called it. In the order of dreams, classrooms sometimes become landings between one world and the next. Past that quiet threshold, the nightmare waits, not in the unseen village now, but in halls draped with cages and bright with frenzy, where the host of this fevered realm runs laughing in loops, pleased with his own cleverness. We will follow, but gently. The trigger we needed has already been named. A veil undone, a red moon risen, a square that answered bells with a body, and a slumped gateway that led to study, and then to storm from here. We will go inward to meet the scholar who made a smile into a labyrinth, and the brain whose gaze turned sight into pressure. But not in a rush. The door is open, and it will wait. The door between waking and study opens like a book left ajar, Hunter, and we drift through its pages. The lecture building feels familiar, even if you have never walked its hall. Benches face a lectern, glassware collects dust that will not settle, and a row of tall windows shows no true outdoors, only the pale suggestion of someone else's sky once. Voices here try to sort the world with chalk and patience. Now the lesson is simpler. Every path that seeks too much, too quickly, eventually teaches humility. Tables lie aslant, as though the room tilted during a thought. Figures sit where students once would, their attention fixed on a professor who is late by several years. Nothing in this place intends to startle you. Even the doors open with the manners of a library. Quiet hinges, steady air. Walk as if you have time, because you do. The building is not a trap, so much as a landing between one mind and the next. When you pass its second threshold, the smell of dry paper fades into the iron breath of cagework. and the world arranges itself into a diagram you can walk inside. There it is at last, the Hall of the Host. The nightmare of Mensis is built like a thesis that keeps revising itself. Bridges which loop back to their own beginnings, staircases that arrange your steps into the shape of a question, galleries where every shelf is a rung in a thought, and somewhere always laughter trailing around a corner just before you turn it. Not cruel laughter, pleased laughter. It belongs to a scholar who arranged this clever warren and delights in guiding you through it like a host who will not be still. He calls himself Micolash. His voice arrives first, bouncing off the cages so that it seems to speak from the roof of your skull. He mutters to Kos, or some say Kosm, and to the air itself. Most often he begs, grant us eyes. He does not threaten, he petitions. Follow gently, and you will notice that each corridor he chooses is a kind of demonstration. Mind-herded, will narrowed, the self-persuaded to listen as an instrument, rather than to speak as a person. He has made a museum of his method and put himself in every exhibit. The iron crowns you pass, hexagonal cages that sit on brow and skull, explain his temperament better than any speech. They do not punish as shackles do, they pair. Worn long enough, they teach the will to quiet itself, to make the mind an aerial that catches distant weather. To those who fashioned them, this felt like ascension by discipline. To those who looked on from outside, the cages seemed like invitations for people to walk out of themselves and not quite find the way back. Hold one with both hands if you like, and feel how its bars press thought into a point. The way a lens gathers light so tightly that it burns whatever lies under it. A kind thought now. Micolash did not build his halls to hurt you. He built them to hold your attention. He believes that if you are kept engaged, chasing, listening, responding, then the same attention might be noticed by the beings above. He is wrong about many things, but he is not entirely wrong about that. In the nightmare, attention is a beam, and beams can be followed. Up a flight of steps, the air thins. Out across a narrow bridge, a pressure builds behind the eyes like a storm choosing where to strike. You meet the first sign of the brain's influence not as an object, but as an effect. Frenzy rising like quick frost. Breath going staccato while you try to keep it even. Look away, and the ice cracks and melts. Look back, and the pressure returns. Somewhere beyond the parapets, a vast mind is being used the way one uses a lighthouse. Its light not kind but powerful, and shaped into a beam that tears rather than guides. In this place, sight can bruise. Do not rush the crossing. There are alcoves like kindnesses, and arches that turn the beam aside long enough for breath to slow. Under each shelter, you can hear the other residents of the Tower District humming a nervous lull. Winter lanterns, people call them. Figures with heads like bouquets of eyes, whose arms move with a grace that does not comfort. They sing in a register that threads through the brain's influence and tightens it. To meet their gaze is to feel the mind try to run too fast in place. Avoid the line of sight, and they become almost courteous. content to let you pass with your thoughts unshredded. This is how the nightmare teaches, not by announcing truths, but by letting you feel your way around them. You will notice that ladders here are always near the places where the air hurts most. Down a ladder, the pressure eases. Up another, it gathers again. Architects of ritual love levers, and you will find one in a chamber set like a punctuation mark in the margin of the brain's tower. The handle is cold and beautifully made, as if someone wanted even necessity to be elegant. If you draw it down, the world answers with a sound like chains taught to sing far across the open space. An immense mass lowers, wrinkled, lined with eyes, descending past balconies and bridges until it finds the deep. The beam breaks. The air unclenches. Quiet returns like a hand placed gently on the crown of the head. It is a strange mercy, is it not? Those who begged for eyes made a lantern out of a mind, and all it took to soften the night was to dim that lantern. In the hush that follows, another path appears, the kind that seems obvious only after someone else has shown it. There is a stair at the edge of things, and beyond the stair, a lift that listens when you call it. If you trust the route downward, you will find a chamber where the air has weight, as though it has fallen and settled like velvet. There, the brain of Mensis waits, not as a weapon now, but as a being. If you compose your posture into the simplest greeting, arms raised and lowered in the let's make contact gesture, and hold your patience, a small boon answers your courtesy. A moon rune, as if to say that some higher powers still notice when a traveller prefers ritual to force. In that dim room, the brain feels both terrible and pitiable. Its surface is lined with the very eyes scholars prayed for, and yet their sight brings little peace. That is the lesson folded into the texture of its hide. More vision without more wisdom becomes weather, and weather does not care what it ruins. If, afterward, you choose to end the brain's long use and longer waiting, the act yields a living trace, a living string, taken from that woven tissue, a strand meant for old chalice doors, below the city, based on what we know from item texts. This great brain retrieved by the school of Mensis was indeed lined with eyes of an evil sort, a clue that the school's prize never offered the kindness it promised climb again, but not far, and follow the host's laughter into his maze. He appears in doorways and disappears in book-filled cul-de-sacs, as if he is giving a tour of his favorite library and has forgotten that you are not in on the joke. When finally he lets you close, the room he chooses is small and shaped like a conclusion. He speaks of granting eyes, calls to Kos, and gestures toward a listening sky. He fights when cornered, but even his strikes feel like footnotes to a thesis whose main idea is elsewhere. Press him, and he flees again into corridors he polished with his pacing notice, as you give chase without haste. How his world is arranged to draw you forward by inches. Grates that rise just enough, wooden bridges that shift and become floors, staircases that look back on themselves and reveal that you were always almost where you needed to be. He is designing your understanding while pretending to defend his own. When he stops at last, his voice softens. He repeats the old petitions. Grant us eyes, as if the act of asking were the point. Then the room goes still, and you realize he has arranged his own ending as carefully as his maze. Hosts, after all, are judged by how their evenings close. If your attention has drifted, that is fine. The meaning is gentle and easy to catch as it drifts past you again. The lecture building eased us between minds. The nightmare of Mensis arranged itself like a lesson couched in laughter. Cages taught the will to be narrow. A brain made a lantern of sight until a hand on a lever dimmed the cruelty to a kindly dark. And the host conducted us through his argument until we learned it by walking it. In a little while, we will step beyond his library and climb toward a room where a lullaby tries to quiet what cannot be seen. But for a few breaths more, let the brain's pressure be gone from your temples, and let the iron crowns rest where they are. You are not asked to wear one tonight. With the beam broken and the air gentled, Hunter, we can feel what remains after the storm. A tower district that remembers hurting and has decided, for now, to set the knives down. Where frenzy once pressed at the back of the eyes like a clenched fist, there is only the ordinary ache of long thought. The bridges no longer hiss with invisible needles. Alcoves that served as emergency shelters look almost like places to pause by choice. The night is not suddenly kind, but it is not intent on teaching by pain. It is willing to be read at a slower pace. Down where a lift opens into cool shadow, the great mind that had been used as a lantern rests like a harbored star, its terrible gleam folded in upon itself. You may stand before it without harm now, if you wish, and shape your body into the simplest, oldest greeting, arms raised and lowered in patient symmetry. Hold the pose with unhurried stillness, and the nightmare answers with courtesy. A boon from the moonlit lexicon, as if to say that the higher powers sometimes notice a traveler who chooses ritual over force. If you prefer mercy of another kind, ending the brain's long use yields a living trace, warm, threaded, meant for doors that answer to chalice rites. Below the city, back on the bridges, the other residents remain. The figures whose heads bloom with gathered eyes still walk their careful paths and hum their thread of song. Their gaze is its own hazard, and always has been. But without the great beam to sharpen it, their presence feels less like a storm and more like a weather you can predict. They respond to patience. Look away, let them pass. Keep to the better angles of the stone. This has always been the safest way to cross a dangerous place, with respect for what it is, and without the need to win every argument it offers. Once the district is calm enough to think in, the narrow road resumes its rise. Steps lean inward as you climb, wooden slats and iron grates knitting the path through galleries where books have been replaced by diagrams in the air. You may glimpse, at intervals, a veiled woman upon a landing, a figure from an older age whose presence, based on what we see throughout the city, seems to acknowledge the way upward rather than block it. She does not speak. She points and is gone. The ascent into what people call Mergo's loft divides itself into simple tasks: stair, then balcony, then a room whose windows look out on nothing you can use. From above, a lullaby drifts down, too soft to fill the space, yet too steady to be ignored. It makes the iron feel warmer in the hand and the stone less eager to echo. The song is not meant for you, and yet it welcomes you all the same, the way a cradle rhyme will tolerate a quiet visitor at the door. On certain landings, the night pools like ink. The figures that oppose you here move with the confidence of assigned duty. Masks, blades, and step patterns that suggest they believe they are guarding a nursery. We need not hate them. The nightmare gives roles to those who ask for purpose. They accept it. As you pass under a broken arch, the tune becomes a line you can almost hum, and then a melody you recognize without knowing where from. Down in the city, a little music box plays something very like it. This could imply that the lullaby above and the keepsake below share a theme. Perhaps the same family of notes traveling through different rooms of the same sorrow. The path bends, and one last narrow bridge asks you to trust the air one more time. On the far side, the tower stops behaving like a maze and becomes a straight argument in stone. This is the place. This is the room. This is the door. A pram waits beyond that door, as though someone set it down in a cloud and forgot that the cloud was only mist. It rocks without moving. A fog lantern shines without light. You do not need to step closer to understand that the song is trying to answer a need that has no answer. Somewhere within the room, a guardian keeps time for that song, like scissors opening and closing with great care. If you rest a hand on the door frame, the wood says what the room would say if it spoke. Be very quiet and very clear. You are not here to steal anything, and there is nothing to take. You are not here to argue with grief. You are here to walk to the end of a way that others began. Whether you think of yourself as a hunter or only as a witness, the lullaby makes the same simple request. Finish this gently. There are details the mind may reach for and then let go. In the galleries below, the iron crowns were meant to pair will into listening. Here, listening has become the whole world. In the district behind you, a mind served as a lantern that burned thought into pain. Here, the smallest notes of a melody are enough to hold the air in a mild grip. In the places beneath the city, a queen learned how grief can learn to live forever. Here, her presence is only a pointing hand, because the rest must be done by someone who has not yet spent all their mortal time. If you have drifted, gather only this. The pressure is gone from the eyes. The great mind has been honored or released. The path to the nursery stands open, and the sound that fills it is a lullaby that asks nothing but steadiness. The tower has turned from cleverness to purpose, from riddles to a room. The night would prefer that no one raise their voice here again. The door yields to the same quiet patience we have kept all night, hunter, and the room beyond meets us with a softness that is almost kind. A pram waits in the center, as if it has been placed inside a low cloud that decided not to drift. Candles measure the air with small, unwavering flames. The lullaby you have heard on the stairs is clear here. Like a thread drawn straight, it does not ask to be noticed. It continues whether you listen or not, the way the sea continues when sleepers are safe ashore. Do not step quickly. This chamber has learned to forgive only in slow movements. If you stand with one hand on the doorframe and let the song pass through you twice, the room seems to accept you as furniture. Nothing stirs that does not need to. The wind does not reach this height. Even the stone has the politeness of a nursery floor, firm enough to carry weight without echo. When the guardian shows herself, she arrives without spectacle, as though she's been standing there the entire time and merely chose the moment at which you would be able to see her. Her presence does not crash, it settles. Robes dark as shut wings drape to the floor. More than 2 arms unfold with the unhurried poise of someone setting a table. Where a face might be, the air seems to decline to give an answer. There is nothing gloating in her manner, nothing wild. She has the assurance of a role performed for so long that it has become a posture. Watch, hush, keep the circle, keep the song. We are not here to take anything that can be held. We are not here to argue with grief. We are here to witness what the school of menses began, and to end only what refuses to end itself. The guardian reads your stance the way a careful nurse reads whether an infant can sleep through a visitor. She moves when you move, always between you and the pram, always shaping the space so that the smallest sound in the room remains the most important one. When she closes distance, blades whisper like ribbon through cloth. When she withdraws, the lullaby fills the gap she leaves. Nothing in her rhythm is cruel. It is simply practiced. There is a hush within the hush, an interval in which the light seems to think. In that interval, shadows gather and duplicate, and the guardian acquires a companion woven from dark. The room does not become dangerous so much as it becomes deep, like a pool at evening. Your eyes learn to trust the simple rule that has guided us since the parapet. Keep to what is steady, find the better angle, let impatience pass you by. The duplicate disperses when the dark breathes out. The song resumes its small task, a measure of time in a place that has almost run out of it. If you have drifted, you have missed nothing. The meaning is plain and gentle. A caretaker stands between an unseen child and everything that never learned how to knock. She was given this purpose by a will older than the city, or so the scene suggests, and she has carried it so faithfully that the air around her moves in sympathy. You are not asked to hate her. You are asked to understand the shape of the duty that holds her together, and then to continue past it, because the night must learn how to rest. When, at last, the guardian's motion ceases, and her many hands fold into stillness, the room does not celebrate. It exhales. The lullaby goes on for a few breaths more, as if completing a pattern that began long ago and prefers not to stop mid-stitch. Then, from within the fogged cradle of the pram, comes the sound that has named this height since the first time a bellwoman learned the tune. the last cry. It is not loud, it is not long. It is a small human sound in a place that has forgotten how to make them, and because of that, it fills every corner. The song yields to it without protest, the way a tide yields to a stone thrown once and never again. Silence follows, not as a blow, but as a settling. The air becomes ordinary air. The floor becomes only floor. A point of gentle light kindles beside the pram, an ordinary lamp where there was none, as if the nightmare itself acknowledges the close of its vigil. Even the wind, which never reached this room, seems content to rest just beyond the walls. You may stand a long time without the world asking anything of you. If you listen, you might notice the smallest echo of a music box you heard in another life, a few notes with the good sense to stop when their work is done. If your thoughts go to the woman who points and vanishes, they are welcome to. At the threshold below, she has been waiting longer than anyone can quite say when the cry quiets and the room remembers how to be a room. She will be there again, not to praise or grieve, only to incline her head and let you pass. Her sorrow belongs to an age beneath the city, to halls that never see the sky, yet it knows this tower perfectly. Some truths are fluent in many architectures. Set your palm on the wood of the pram if you like. It is cool and unremarkable, a thing made by hands for a purpose as old as lullabies. There are no trophies here. There is no face to study. If you expected a revelation to look like a portrait, let the disappointment go. The important things have already happened. The song did its work. The guardian kept her promise as long as promises could be kept, and the last cry taught the room that it no longer needed to be a nursery. You may notice, as your eyes adjust to the calm, that some threads you have carried with you tug lightly for a moment and then relax. Doors elsewhere loosen on their hinges. The night, which arrived tight with questions, leaves a little room in the joints for answers. Do not tally gains and losses in a place like this that is work for daylight, for ledgers, for the lower streets. Here, the arithmetic is simpler. A vigil kept, a vigil ended. Let us honor a few gentle uncertainties without worrying them into noise. The lullaby you heard here is the same tune some carry in a little box down in the city, or so most players recognize, which could imply inheritance or echo rather than direct authorship. Some say the unseen child is the legacy of a union no one should have attempted. Others think the guardian is a shadow of those who once served deep underground. Based on what we know, the game does not confirm these specifics. The city loves a theory the way winter loves a fire. But the room does not give us more than it gives us, and that too is kindness. Before we leave, allow one last reflection to settle, the kind that makes sleep easy when it arrives later. So much of the world's harm begins as care that forgot how to stop. A nursing hand becomes a net. A mind open to wonder becomes a lantern that burns. A scholar's hospitality becomes a maze with no exits. Ending a vigil is not the same as breaking faith. Sometimes it is the only way to keep faith, with what the vigil was meant to guard. When you step back toward the door, the lamp glows like a shore light. The corridor beyond is only a corridor again. The wind outside has its old habits and no longer tries to speak in runes if you feel lighter. It is not because a burden has been stolen from you, but because something that was never yours to carry has been allowed to lie down. We will not rush. We will take the stairs at the pace of the song that has just ended, which is to say, with patience and with no need to prove anything to anyone. As we descend, the world will begin to knit itself into what it was before bells learned to meddle. The bridges will feel like bridges, not questions. The cages will be only iron. The figures on their rounds will seem less like arguments and more like people in need of a kinder age. Our path will lead us toward the city's other endings, the choices that open when a cry falls silent. But that is the next circle. For this moment, keep the calm of the nursery in your chest. Let your thoughts match the evenness of the light. If your eyes close, they close into the quiet this room has finally remembered how to keep. Down the first flight of stairs, the tower keeps its promise and remains only a tower. The song is gone, but its evenness stays in your breathing like a guest who leaves the house tidy. On a landing where the wind gathers and spends itself, a woman waits in pale, stained finery. You have seen her before. Gestures as spare as a ritual. She does not speak. She inclines her head once, a small motion with the weight of years. Then she is gone, as if the air has remembered a name and released it. If grief could bow, this is the form it would take. Acknowledgement without petition, farewell without demand. The quiet after the last cry arranges the mind around simple things. A lamp that was not there before burns with ordinary light. The iron rails curve like calm thoughts around a problem that has stopped insisting. Somewhere below, bridges settle into being bridges again. You can stand here and feel the city rethreading itself, the way a garment finds its shape when the strain leaves the fabric. This, too, is a kind of mercy. Not triumph, not revelation, only the return of a room to its first purpose. Near the place where the lullaby did its work, a small relic now rests, a 1/3 of umbilical cord. In game terms, you can find such a fragment here after the hush. Other fragments exist elsewhere. Item words speak of great ones losing their children and yearning for surrogates. Whether you accept every implication is your own business. The fragment sits quietly and lets you decide how many meanings to carry. In practice, consuming 3 such chords later allows a hunter to meet the night's end without yielding their will. Loss is a teacher that speaks in many dialects. Down in yahar'gul, a little music box plays part of the lullaby you heard whole among the rafters. The box is a domestic thing, sized for a pocket, turning grief into something hands can wind and hold. Up here, the song became a room that remembered how to breathe. Down there, it is a thread through a family story that found no gentle conclusion. These echoes do not demand a single theory. They simply show that, even in a city so large, The same comforts are tried again and again in different houses. To the tired mind, repetition is kindness. If your thoughts drift toward the host who made a maze of his ambitions, or toward the great mind whose gaze once bit the air, let them pass and return like slow birds. There is a place for them in the quiet that follows, because the nightmare does not end like a slammed door. It calms by degrees. The brain lowered into courtesy left behind a token from the moon's lexicon, which could imply that attention offered without demand sometimes receives an answer without cruelty. The host's laughter has faded into a library hush. Even the cages along the parapet seem to have lost their hunger to direct other people's thoughts. What remains then after the hush? There is the simple matter of what a hunter does next. Paths open when songs end. A field waits where a gate once held, silver grass combed by a wind that is nobody's voice. A figure in a chair has words ready for you, and beyond his offer more choices wait. To close the book when bid, to resist the closing and argue for one more chapter, or, if you have kept enough old promises woven into those quiet chords, to greet what comes after with your eyes steady and your hands empty. You do not need to decide any of this while your pulse is still in time with the lullaby the door will keep. Above the city, the red glare softens towards something like night. People who made themselves into questions begin to look like people again, even if their hands still remember the shape of a ritual. In basement rooms, notes are folded away. In wards where children were taught to think past what they were, the windows are latched with ordinary caution instead of ceremonial care. In the quarter that the city did not name, the bells go back to being tools rather than invitations. The healing that can happen happens in small, unremarkable measures. A shoulder set straight, a sleep that lasts till morning, a cup that tastes of nothing but water. There is, of course, the matter of the city's older grief, the one that built halls beneath the ground and crowned a queen in the dark. She has followed you to this height more than once, at times with a hand that points, at times with her face veiled and her composure like a lesson. When the last cry faded, she bowed. Many take this as acknowledgement, relief arriving late. If some whisper that the child you never saw belonged to her first, and to a being the city cannot point to, let that remain a whisper. The game gives sorrow an implication, not certificates. It does not change the work your steps have done. Collecting the fragments the city calls chords is practical work, but it also feels like tidying, a gathering of threads left hanging by acts that reached too far. One piece from a clinic that mistook transformation for salvation. One from an old workshop that kept a dream for tired hands. One from this room where a song outlasted its purpose. Hold 3 of them, and the final doors in the dream answer. The field opens. The world admits a more difficult kindness. This is not conquest, it is readiness. The willingness to meet the last of the night's questions at their own size, without enlarging them further. What do such endings mean for the people who remain? Perhaps only this, that that seeking without listening becomes a fever, and that every fever, however righteous in its beginning, wants a cool cloth in the end. The school that begged for eyes is silent for now. Its cage crowns hang unsummoned. The lantern made of thought is dim, and in its dimness, the bridges remember how to carry rather than to test. Even the tower that housed the pram looks a little less like a thesis and a little more like a thing built by hands. When systems pause, lives can resume. That is the bargain a city keeps when it survives the night. You may leave a small courtesy before you go, a slow gesture of greeting to the air on the balcony, a bow in the direction where a veiled woman once stood, a breath counted to the length of the lullaby, and then released. The nightmare has room for such gestures. It reads them as signs that the next person who climbs these stairs might find a place already gentled by someone who came before. As you turn your steps toward the way down, the parapets sound different. The bars of the cages no longer sing of pressure. They chatter like empty wind chimes in good weather. The lamps have honest halos again. Figures pass and do not need to be read like riddles. Think of the city you will walk back into. A coil of streets with too many stories for one pair of ears, and yet, for the moment, a willingness to let its old ghost questions rest. You do not have to answer them all. You do not have to stay awake to watch the answers gather like dew. Once, a scholar by the lake said that eyes on the inside would lift people past their animal confusions. Perhaps he was not entirely wrong. Perhaps he mistook direction for height. Tonight, the inward eyes worth keeping are the kind that recognize when a vigil is complete. Look gently within and see if the watch you have kept has ended. If it has, set it down. The room will keep itself. When we step into the field, choices will present themselves with clean edges. We will give them their due, but we will not let them disturb the calm we have earned. The story is not rushing toward a flare of noise. It is walking itself to bed. Hold that thought as we leave the tower to the wind and the lamp, and let the last of the lullaby become the rhythm of your feet on the stairs. The wind on the parapets combs the night back into order, hunter, and the stairs lead you down with the steady rhythm of a pulse, returning to rest. When the gate to the dream opens, the field feels different. Silver grass leans one way, as though the world has exhaled. The workshop windows keep a low, hearth-like glow. This is how the dream tells you that your walk has reached its narrow place. Somewhere near the great tree, an old caretaker, German, waits with an offer shaped like mercy. Do not hurry. The doll's voice is soft and clear in the grass. She does not command, she invites. Her words, as always, are simple. The night is nearly done. The one who has guided many hunters will see you now. The field holds its calm while you cross it, and the sky above seems less a ceiling and more a cloth laid smooth by patient hands. In such a place, a choice can be made without noise. Here is what the caretaker offers when you arrive: a return to ordinary mornings. He will sever the bond that keeps you in this field of sleep and duty, and you will wake where streets remember their names, and sky colors can be named without guessing. If you have ever set down a heavy pack, you know the shape of this gift. He does not dress it as a riddle. He only asks whether your watch has ended and whether he should end it for you. If you lower your head and accept, the world answers with daylight. A bench, first edges of dawn, a city that looks like itself again. The dream ends. The hunt becomes something people recall as a season that finally broke. This outcome is not cowardice. It is a reading of the moment. The vigil was kept. The lullaby was heard. The last cry fell quiet. And now careful hands offer release. Some nights end like this, tidy, grateful, done. If, however, you lift your eyes and decline, the field changes the way a room changes when a window is opened. Gurman does not pout, he stands. He has always kept this second courtesy for those who still have strength to spend. The duel that follows is not hate. It is a lesson finished in movement. He moves with the memory of every path he has walked in this grass. You answer with the calm you carried up from the tower. When at last his blade returns to stillness, the grass does not complain. The doll will remember him with kindness. That is her nature. In some lives the story would settle there. Teacher met, teacher thanked, book closed. But this field answers to a more distant will, and that will steps forward now, drawn like a tide by the path you have walked, and the keepsakes you carry, a presence tall as the sky's idea of a person, gathers itself from the edges of the dream. It is not a surprise. It is the completion of a sentence begun when the city learned the wrong names for comfort. If you came to this place unprepared, without certain fragments that harden the will, you feel yourself yielding. You kneel, and the field accepts you as its new caretaker, seated where the old one sat. The cycle folds over into a new page. The dream continues, and the doll tends her charge as before. There is another path, narrower, made by people who gather difficult fragments with patient hands. In hidden rooms and quiet heights, you have taken up, one by one, portions of a promise older than the city. 3 chord fragments said to ready a mind against binding. If you come here with those keepsakes already part of you, the tall presence cannot make a tether of your bowing head. The knot does not slip. The field admits your answer, and the will that wished to bind you must show itself, not as an idea, but as a body you can meet and refuse. The encounter that follows is strange and simple. There are no speeches that matter. The presence had hoped to make you a hinge. You choose to be a door that swings the other way. Patience serves better than heat. When the pressure breaks and the field steadies, something infant and immense remains where the presence stood. A beginning, not in words, but in form. The doll knows what to do with beginnings. She leans down, the way people do when they greet new life, and her voice is a lullaby without a tune, a kindness given to a shape still learning what to be in this reading of the night. You have climbed out of the story that made you, and into the one that will make what comes next. People call this a better ending, not better like a prize, but better like a promise kept if you have drifted. Here is the meaning as gently as possible. After the hush in the tower, the dream opens its final gate. You may accept rest and wake at dawn. You may refuse and inherit the chair. Or, if 3 quiet keepsakes sit within you, you may refuse servitude itself, meet the will behind the dream as an equal, and leave the field as something newly begun. The city stones do not change color in any of these readings. The sky still moves through its patient hours, but inside the story, the weight shifts. A vigil ends with a bow, continues as a duty, or continues as a life the world has not seen before. What remains for Yohannem after your choice? Streets where water tastes of water, windows that close for ordinary reasons, workshops that stop measuring people by what they can break and start measuring them by what they can mend. The choir's questions remain, but quieter. The school that made cages has put them down for now. The bells the city learned to fear go back into drawers, the way families store tools used in a bad season. In hidden places, some will still listen for replies from the cold heavens. That is the nature of those who ache to understand. But perhaps they will do it more softly, for a while. There is a kind wisdom to keep close as we walk the last stretch of night. Cures and questions were both attempts at love that forgot how to rest. The church poured comfort until comfort overflowed the cup. The scholars tuned minds until the strings cut fingers. The host made a maze of his welcome. And yet, in each there was a small light, trying to learn where to stand. A city survives when it remembers to dim that light before it blinds, and to let rooms be rooms again. You have helped the city remember. Down the slope of the field, the gate is only a gate. The workshop doors open and close without sending a message. The doll speaks as if you were always meant to hear her voice at the end of things. The caretaker, gone or returned to the chair, will be where the field needs him to be and nowhere else. These are not mysteries. They are the ordinary arrangements of a place built to be kind to people who walk too far in their sleep. If your eyes have grown heavy, let them. The story will lower its own lamp. We have reached the circle where what remains is only the gentle catalogue of ordinary things restored, daylight or duty or a different birth, streets that want sweeping, not saving, a sky that behaves like a sky. From here, our ending will not climb. It will descend step by even step into a quiet you can keep. If a thought rises to ask which ending is best, let it pass and fade. The best ending is the one that lets you sleep and then wakes you kindly. We will pause here, in the grass that remembers every footfall, and breathe with the dream as it settles. In the last part of our walk, we will gather our thread, the school that begged for eyes, the laughing host, the brain lantern, the bowing queen, the lullaby, and set it down where you can find it again tomorrow. Nothing sudden, nothing sharp, only the closing of a door that was built to close. The grass keeps its soft angle, hunter, as if the night has remembered what it meant to be ordinary. We stand a moment and feel the field learn our silence. The workshop breathes the way a sleeping house breathes. The sky is steady cloth. There is nothing to solve. The story knows where to go when a vigil ends. Let us gather the thread we tied at the beginning, carefully and without hurry. A school begged for eyes and made cages to shape the mind into an aerial. A host built a smiling maze to keep the world's attention, certain that attention would become welcome. A vast mine was lowered like a cruel lantern, turning sight into pressure and pressure into pain. A queen walked the upper stairs, bringing an older grief to point the way. A lullaby climbed the tower, kept time for a patient guardian, and then yielded to a small cry that taught the room how to stop. After that hush, the dream opened its gate and offered 3 quiet ways to finish a long watch. Each part of it was a choice, and each choice was answered softly when it was made. We will set each piece down where it belongs. The cages are iron again. They do not instruct anyone tonight. The host's corridors are only corridors, dust settling on their clever turns. The brain rests in the deep, either honored or released, its beam a memory rather than a weather. The Queen's bow is emotion that will last longer than triumph, because it is made of relief and not of noise. The lullaby has finished its work, and so has stopped, which is the mark of a true lullaby. The dream keeps its field, as a field keeps dew, and the gate remembers how to be only a gate. Walk with me in this last stretch, and notice how the city receives itself. Bridges carry and do not test. Steps lead up and down rather than inward and inward. The bells that once kept time for a rite are put away the way families shelve tools when the room needs to be quiet. The streets do not become pure or new. They become possible. This is their best. We will not make a ledger, but we will speak a gentle truth and leave it to rest. People reached for more sight because they were tired of being afraid. They reached for cures because they were tired of being hurt. They made a maze because they were tired of not being seen. These are recognizable aches. They are not an excuse for harm, and they are not a sentence to repeat. They are the reasons a city needs sleep, and lamps, and rooms that are allowed to be rooms. If you listen now, you hear what is left when argument quits the air. Water in a gutter, a hinge that will wait for morning oil, a coat being shaken on a step. The noises make no promises and ask for no vows. They are strong precisely because they mean nothing more than what they mean. This is what a hunt gives back when it goes to ground. A soundscape small enough to live inside without thinking too hard. Think of the faces we passed in the high places, the winter lanterns with their bouquets of eyes, teaching that sight without rest is only a kind of weather. The bellwomen who felt the rhythm turn under their feet and learned to call for an answer the city could not keep paying. The guardians who stood because standing was the only shape their promises could take. None of them were waiting for speeches. They were waiting for a change in the air tonight. They have it. The air has stopped trying to be a message. There is room here for the smallest kindnesses. If a figure in pale, stained finery appears again on a stair, she does not need to point. This is not a night for direction, only for recognition. If the host's laughter arrives as a tired echo, It is not a challenge, only a fragment that will fade when it is ready. If the ironwork hums as wind passes through it, the note is plain and low, the sort you forget as soon as you smile. We will speak one last thought about endings, and then we will be quiet. Endings need not punish. They may simply return each thing to the size it can keep. A school returns to a room with tables and chairs and the sound of paper. A workshop returns to wood shavings and tools that fit the hand. A field returns to grass that accepts footprints and then lets them go. A tower returns to being a height you notice and then pass. A city returns to a place where someone can sleep without learning a new word for dawn if you feel the day's weight leave your shoulders. Trust that feeling. If your eyes lower and rise like a slow tide, that is the story noticing you and matching your breath. We have not hurried, and we will not hurry now. The last lamp we carry is small and well shaded. We set it on the ledge and let it make a circle of quiet that is just wide enough for the two of us and any memory that wants to sit without talking. There is no lesson we have not already learned together. Curiosity without kindness becomes a fever. Charity without rest spills and stains. Duty without an end becomes a room that never lets its singer leave tonight. The fever cooled, the cup was righted, and the song allowed itself to end. That is enough. When you step away from this page, the field will remember your boots for a minute and then forget, which is the proper order of things. The city will wake at its own speed. If you find yourself there when morning is new, breathe the slack air and let it enter you without judgment. If you find yourself instead in a chair that must be kept, arrange yourself with the quiet authority of someone who understands terms. If you find yourself somewhere altogether different, a beginning in your arms and a voice nearby that knows how to soothe, set your attention where it is asked to be and nowhere else. These are all true ways to end the night. We have come as far as we need to come. The thread lies coiled and still. The cages are dark shapes against a kinder sky. The tower keeps its last lamp and nothing more. The dream has its gate, and it is no longer calling your name. You may sleep now, and if the names pass through you once on their way to the shelves, Menses, Micolash, the brain, Mergo, the song, the bow, let them pass. They will be where you left them when you wake, and smaller. Lay the mind down the way you would lay a book face down, so it will not lose your place. The page will wait, the room will keep. The night will close the door for you and draw the latch with a patient hand. Rest, hunter. You have learned how to finish things gently. The city is grateful for the quiet,